They found the box when the house was trying to forget them. For weeks after her grandmother's funeral, the old place resisted being emptied. Drawers sighed when opened. The staircase learned to creak in new places, as if protesting every step that carried another memory out the door. In the attic, dust was not dust but soft punctuation, commas on the rafters, ellipses on the trunks, begging the story to stall. Anna was the only one who didn't mind the dust. She wore her grandfather's flannel shirt and her own stubbornness, hair twisted up with a pencil, cheeks streaked like war paint. The August heat pressed on the roof and made the air taste like old cedar. Downstairs, her mother packed kitchen plates in a fury of newspaper. Every so often she called up through the hatch, "Leave the junk. Take only what you need." "What if the junk is what I need?" Anna muttered, and the attic pretended not to hear. She had pushed aside a carton of winter curtains and the crate of brittle magazines her grandmother had never thrown away. Behind them, wedged between a joist and the chimney, was the corner of something wooden, too dark to be pine, too deliberate to be scrap. She tugged. It was heavier than it looked. It came loose with a sigh. A jewelry box, but not like any she had seen. Walnut, she thought. Maybe chestnut, gone almost black with age. On the lid, 2 swallows were inlaid in mother of pearl, their wings nearly touching, their beaks turned toward a sliver of moon fashioned from some pale bone. A band of lighter wood circled the lid in a braid, and at the very front, instead of a keyhole, a tiny iron swallow's tail served as a latch. "Found anything interesting?" her mother called. Anna ran her thumb along the lid's braid. "Maybe," she called back, noncommittal. Her mother had an allergy to maybe, since the illness, since hope had proven itself a poor investment. Practicality kept her upright now. Maybe made her wobble. The latch clicked like a polite throat. The lid lifted, and lavender rose as if someone had been waiting under there with perfume and patience. Inside, the box was lined in faded blue silk, frayed at the corners as if other fingers had worried it in other summers. There was a little brass cylinder with teeth, a music movement. Beside it lay a ribbon, red once, now the color of old cherries, threaded through a small brass key. A folded paper label dangled from the ribbon, handwritten in a looping hand that curved like swallow's flight. "For the granddaughter who asks the right questions." Strange, Anna whispered. She was 23, not given to melodrama, not since the last 2 years had taught her the cost of being grand. But the note made her scalp prickle. She slid it back into the silk and kept going. There was a photograph tucked into a sleeve at the back, the paper turned velvet soft by time. 2 girls stood shoulder to shoulder, ribbons in their hair, each with a hand on the other's back, the gesture casual and profound. One girl, a few years older, squinted in the sun. The other looked straight at the camera, chin up, as if daring it to blink first. Someone had written on the back in ink gone brown, "Irina and Helena." Summer 1949. Anna ran her finger under the names. Irina, her grandmother, and Helena, a name she had never heard at the table where their family history was supposed to live. No one had told her there was a sister. Beneath the photograph was a handkerchief, the linen so fine it was almost transparent, edges scalloped and embroidered with tiny blue forget-me-nots. In one corner, an initial, Z, not I for Irina. Not H for Helena. Z like Zoria, like Zenaida, like Zosha, she said aloud, thinking of the great-grandmother whose name floated through stories as if it were incense. Something sweet and slightly unreal. No one called her Zosha now. She had been Zofia by the time they emigrated, a sensible name for a sensible life. She died when Anna was 6, a soft lap and a smell of soap. She had never seemed like someone who left secrets in walls. At the bottom of the box lay a thin stack of paper tied with thread, letters folded small as if trying to take up less space. The top one had no stamp, only a pencil note on the outside. If the song is ever needed, wind it thrice. If the house forgets the way, ask the swallows. The house forgets the way? Anna said, half a laugh, half a question, as if the rafters might answer. She slipped the thread and unfolded the first letter. The paper crackled like leaves. The script belonged to someone practiced in carefulness. No flourish, neat downstrokes, a margin that obeyed itself. My dear girls, it began. If these pages remain, then the world has done what worlds do. Rearranged itself until what was obvious to us is impossible to those we love. The swallows will find you if you listen. Do not anger the house. Do not run toward voices calling you by a name you have not yet earned, and remember the rules. What is carried in the mouth is a story. What is carried in the hands is a choice. When the song begins, be seated. When the room tilts, do not stand. If you must return, leave something of yourself where you stood. It is rude to take two things when you arrived with one. Forgive me for not telling you sooner. Some doors would rather be knocked on by the future. Zosha. Anna, do you need water? Her mother again, nearer now, the ladder creaking as she climbed 2 rungs. I'm okay, Anna said. She wasn't sure if this was true in any useful sense. She put one palm flat on the box's lid. The wood was warm, as if it remembered hands. Wind it thrice, the letter said. Ask the swallows. Do not run toward voices. Is it silly? She asked the swallows carved in pearl. They stared back like creatures who had learned not to waste their language on questions that would answer themselves. She found the keyhole by accident, in the shadow under the music movement. It wasn't a keyhole at all, just an opening that recognized the brass key by the shape of its boldness. She slipped the key in and turned. The cylinder's teeth tensed with a sound that was half sigh, half intake of breath. Then she lifted the lid on its rest so the cylinder could spin. The melody that spilled out was one she had heard without hearing all her childhood. The lullaby her grandmother had hummed with dishes, with laundry, with the ache of the last months as the world got too bright. It had no words Anna knew, just a tune that folded itself around the edges of your worry and made them less sharp. Her chest loosened. Her hands forgot dust. The attic swam. Wind it thrice. She let the cylinder exhaust itself, then wound again. The second time, the song felt older, like it had a history of being sung not to one baby but to many rooms. The light changed. It wasn't darker or brighter, it was as if the particles of air had straightened their spines. She sensed, rather than saw, the wallpaper that used to cover the plaster, the trunk that used to sit under the window where the suitcases were now. Anna, her mother said, a frown in the syllables. Her head, just through the hatch, haloed by the bright kitchen below. Don't be there much longer. The heat, coming, Anna said, though the word had to swim to her lips through a thickness that kept trying to settle. She wound the key a third time. The cylinder clicked, the tune took breath. The third playing was not a song. It was a place. The rafters sighed as if relieved. The boards under Anna's feet woke up and remembered how to be pine, not just wood. The smell of lavender brightened, then braided itself with something yeasty and alive. Bread? She blinked, and the attic blinked back different. The hatbox went somewhere. A trunk appeared where the box of curtains had been. The pencil in Anna's hair rolled and fell. She scrambled for it, hand striking silk where there had been dust. She sat down because the letter had told her to sit when the room tilted. The room agreed by tilting. She placed the box carefully on her lap, like a cat who would not be pleased to fall. The melody pooled around her ankles, climbed her shins, settled in her knees. She did not run toward voices. There were no voices yet, just a radio somewhere below the attic door, a violin scraping scales, then finding sweetness. The radio announcer had an accent her grandmother had ironed out of her English, and the date he mentioned was a year that belonged on museum placards, not in kitchens. And the heat wave continues through July. Pass the fan if you're close to it, he joked, and someone laughed as if radios were allowed to be funny where she was now. The lid of the box closed itself with a soft finality. The key, warmed by her hands, cooled like a polite small animal. Anna pressed her palm to the boards where a seam had never been, and her hand met the seam that currently was. Two planks that in her century were one. She inhaled the room's new old air and tasted sun on cloth. She stood, slowly. Her legs trembled with the effort of pretending this was fine. She tucked the box under her arm and crossed to the hatch. It wasn't the same hatch. This one had a proper door that slid, and a rope loop that had been oiled this week, not outlived oil generations ago. She pulled. Below, where her mother's stove and her parents' old calendar used to be, there was a white enamel table with chrome legs. A woman bent over it, rolling dough with her forearms, not pressing too hard. Anyone could tell it was a dough that wanted kindness. Her hair was wrapped in a scarf, her bare arms powdered with flour, a line of freckles along her shoulders like someone had dripped cinnamon on skin. Another girl stood by the sink, rinsing jars, her mouth pursed in a way that would be a whistle if it weren't busy being a secret. She couldn't be more than 14. She hummed the last bars of the lullaby, very softly, and every hair on Anna's arm stood up. The humming girl's face, when she turned, was a face Anna had kissed goodbye 2 weeks ago in a bed that smelled like lemon and endings. Irina? Anna said, before she remembered not to run toward voices. The girl wiped her hands on her skirt and looked up, the way a girl looks up at an attic hatch when that attic is a trickster. Mama, she called, laughing a little. Is someone in our roof again? The swallows are bringing guests. The woman at the table smiled without looking up. If the swallows bring someone, feed her, she said, poking the dough with fingers that knew the future of bread. And ask her name gently, in case the syllables have traveled far. Anna crouched at the edge of the opening, her own heart pounding far enough away that she might miss it. She knew these women. She had never met them this age. The younger was her grandmother, before the flight to another country, before the grief that turned her long, crowded stories into a handful of careful facts. The older was the great-grandmother who had only ever been lap and soap to her, who now put flour on the table like someone laying down a map. Anna tried. Words were bricks in her mouth, a house without mortar. I'm Anna, she said finally, which was both true and too much. I'm your granddaughter, she did not say. Your great-granddaughter, she did not dare. The older woman lifted her eyes, blue with a ring of green at the iris like a summer lake thinking about pine. She saw the box under Anna's arm and nodded as if an appointment had finally kept itself. Come, Anna, she said. There is no good conversation in an attic. Only secrets. We prefer our secrets warm, with tea. The stairs were where the stairs should be, only sensible and uncracked. Anna climbed down, each step an argument between fear and relief. The kitchen welcomed her like a relative you had meant to write for years and finally did. The enamel table was cool against her palms. A calendar hung by the radio, the month that matched the announcer's voice. The year was not ridiculous. It was exactly what it was, a decade her grandmother sometimes paused on too long before skipping. "Swallows brought you?" the younger girl, Irina, asked. She had flour on her cheek and one shoe off. She stood like someone who knows where her center is because she has had to move it often. She looked at the box with the keen hunger of a girl who wants the kind of magic that does chores and tells you the truth. "They brought the box," Anna said, wishing her voice would stop wobbling entirely. "Or your box brought me." "Zosha's box," the mother corrected. "Though it learned the shape of my hands first. My mother's before mine, and her mother's before that." She slid a knife under the dough and turned it like someone turning a sleeping child. "You've wound it thrice, so you came on purpose, even if you didn't mean to." "Good. On purpose is better for everyone." "You believe me," Anna said. It wasn't a question. She said it anyway, because disbelief would have sunk her, and she could not afford to be sunk. "Belief is not the problem," Zosha said, dusting flour from her knuckles. "Returning is the problem, and remembering the right things. Sit, Irina, tea." Irina put the kettle on with the practice of years. "Which right things?" she asked, skeptical the way bright girls are skeptical. "Not to resist but to see how much the world resists back." "The ones that belong to your mouth," Zosha said. "Not the ones that try to climb into your hands." "Anna, what do your hands carry?" Anna looked down. The box, the red ribbon, threaded with the key, had wound itself around her wrist like a forthright bracelet, as if insisting on being noticed. The photograph, the letter, the handkerchief, she had tucked them back into the box without knowing exactly when. In her right palm was a little dust from the attic that had been. In her left, a small tremble. "Questions," she said, and she swallowed. The lullaby had no words, but it kept trying to write one in her mouth. "Names." "Good," Zosha said. "Names are honest thieves. They take the time they're owed." Outside, swallows threaded the heat with swoops. The radio clicked as the announcer adjusted his papers. Someone in the street shouted for a boy who had outrun his chore. Irina poured tea into thick cups, chipped at the lip. She handed one to Anna as if giving tea to strangers in her kitchen was how a day should go. "Do you know me?" Irina asked, sitting opposite, chin up like the girl in the photograph. "I feel like I know you." "That's a trick of the house, isn't it? Or of the box." "I think I know you," Anna said, and laughed because the sentence wanted a map. "I know your hands. You need like my grandmother." Irina grinned, not minding the tangle. "I will be someone's grandmother if I get to be anything long enough. Mama says time is a hallway with a lot of doors. Sometimes the doors flirt with each other when no one is looking." She reached across the table. "Show me the box." Anna slid it forward. Zosha wiped her fingers and opened the lid with a deftness that told the box it hadn't been waiting in vain. She touched the silk lining once, as if checking that it still remembered the word for blue. Then she lifted the photograph from its sleeve and looked at the girls in paper. She touched the name with her thumb. "Ah," she said, a sound like a stitch that holds. "So it is time for a sister again." "For a what?" Anna asked, her throat suddenly tight. Zosha placed the photograph between them. Irina leaned over the table, hair slipping from her scarf. The handkerchief edge peeped from the box like a shy witness. "You carry questions," Zosha said. "Good. Ask me one. The one that made the swallows come." Anna's heart shook the way a glass shakes on a table when a truck rumbles past. All the questions jostled. How am I here? How do I go back? Why Helena? Why did you write to girls you had not met? What did you mean about doors flirting? But the photograph was heavier than the rest. The other girl's eyes were the color of questions. The back of the photograph said a name that had never sat at their table. "Who is Helena?" Anna asked, and the room exhaled. Zosha smiled a little and took a breath that traveled a long way before it found a place to sit. "She is the secret your grandmother kept because no one had hands big enough to hold it with her," she said. "And she is the reason the box learned to carry songs through walls." Irina looked from one to the other. "Mama," she began, not with impatience but with the ache of a child who knows a story wants telling and has only so much patience for adult pacing. Zosha smoothed the handkerchief with the embroidered Z. "Eat first," she said gently. "I tell better truth with bread in the oven. Anna, you will not stay as long as the dough takes to rise, but we will use our minutes. If the house is kind, it will give us what we need. If it is not," her smile was not unkind and not hopeful. It was a craftsman's smile. A person who has argued with time and knows which argument she can win. "If it is not, we will take what it gives and build the rest later." She set the dough in a bowl, covered it with a cloth clean enough for babies, and slid the bowl to the sunny corner as if handing it to the afternoon. Then she took the photograph again and tapped the edge. "Begin with summer," she said. 1949, the year the river pretended it was a road, the year my girls learned to run faster than news. Begin with Helena's laugh, which was a bell even when there were no churches left with bells. Begin with the day they decided to swap ribbons to see if the world knew the difference. Irina's grin flashed, recognizing the game before the telling. Anna leaned forward in her chair, elbows on the table, heat pooling in her knees. The box under Zosha's hand seemed to hum without sound, as if collecting echoes for later. Downstairs in a kitchen that could not be theirs and was, a great-grandmother began to pull a thread of story from a spool that had waited too long. Upstairs where an attic had changed its mind, the swallows arranged themselves on the window frame like notes on a staff. And in that sliver of time a song made, the house remembered the way. Zosha did not begin with dates. She began with a smell. "Hot stones and river water," she said, opening a window with her wrist. "That is what that summer smelled like. The year your photograph was taken. The year my girls tried to fool the town with 2 ribbons and learned the world pays closer attention than you think, and less." Irina laughed into her cup. "We fooled everyone. You fooled the baker," Zosha said. "And old Bowden with the ferry. You did not fool the river." She slid the photograph back to the table's center. In it the girls stood stubbornly side by side, chin up and chin tilted, each with a ribbon that caught the sun like an idea just hatched. Up close Anna saw the joke. The ribbons had been swapped. The older girl, Helena, with that Bella laugh Zosha had promised, wore the younger's plain blue bow. The younger, Irina, had tied the older's red one so tight the knot looked like a heart determined to stay a heart. "I was shorter by a head," Irina said, mock solemn. "But with the red ribbon I believed I could boss the sky." "Helena let you," Zosha said, not unkindly. "She liked to see what happened when the world mistook you for her. She said it taught her spies how to walk." "Spies?" The word came out of Anna before she could sit it down. It sounded too bright in the kitchen, too eager. "Do not give the word teeth it does not deserve," Zosha said, one eyebrow a stitch. "Most spies, my weak sparrow, are just people who talk too much into ears they do not own. Names for jobs do not make the jobs larger." She set to shaping the dough, pinching and folding as if reminding it of its future. The radio droned on about weather and a dance at the cultural hall. Someone would play a violin, someone would bring pickled mushrooms in a jar with a blue lid. The sound made the air less like a trick and more like a morning. Helena was not a spy, Zosha said. But she carried words across streets that did not like to see words walk. She was older. It was her job to stand between me and the men with paper, between paper and the street, between the street and anyone with a face too interesting. Irina, she glanced at the girl washing the cups and softened the sentence mid-stitch. Irina had other gifts. Counting the bread, Irina said promptly, as if reciting. Keeping track of what we did not have without forgetting what we did. Folding shirts like secrets so no one knew their size. And running, Zosha said. You ran like a thought. It is easy to be fast if no one is looking, Irina said, and shrugged like a bird rearranging itself. Anna leaned on her elbows. The rules from the letter kept circling in her mouth like a tongue remembering a sore tooth. What is carried in the mouth is a story. What is carried in the hands is a choice. She looked down at her fingers curved around her cup. At some point the red ribbon had slid down her wrist and nested in her palm. When had that happened? The silk felt warm as if it had been remembering. She coiled it back around her wrist without thinking and found herself double-wrapped. One ribbon from the box, one from the kitchen. The summer, Zosha said, answering the room as much as the girl from another year. The river had decided to pretend to be a road. Bowden ferried chickens and milk cans and gossip. People ferried names in their throats and tried not to drop any. The men in long coats had learned our block by heart. They learned to walk like men who did not need to knock. And the schoolmaster had learned to mislay a certain book when certain boys came to borrow. Which book? Anna asked, too quickly. Always another book, Zosha said. That is how you know it matters. Helena and... She paused, as if picking up a seam that had snagged. And Lev were always borrowing what would make the next book. He worked at the print shop that wasn't a print shop. In the back, under the calendar with the wrong year, they made pamphlets that said nothing rude and everything dangerous. He had hands like the rest of us, ink under every nail. Lev, Irina echoed, rolling the name like bread under hands. She made the syllable flat, sisterly, like a nickname for a cat. But the way her eyes moved to the window told Anna the name had been a son in that house, whether they admitted it now or not. He brought peaches in a paper bag once, Irina said, half to herself. He said the tree in his aunt's yard did not care for paperwork. He brought trouble, Zosha said, but not with bitterness. The sentence carried a mother's geometry, the way love and fear draw the same shape and argue over who owns the lines. He brought jokes, Irina countered. He said if names must be borrowed, borrow the ones that make your mouth smile. He called me Melina by accident on purpose for a whole week because of the jam on my sleeve. And he called your sister Halia only when no one could hear, Zosha said, and the kitchen held its breath without being asked. Because names fit different and quiet. This is what I mean by two ribbons. My girls thought they could switch the world with a nod and a laugh. The world allowed it almost until it did not. She slid the shaped loaves toward the oven and turned the dial with a practiced wrist. Do you smell the crust at the edge of what is not yet? She asked. Eyes turned to Anna as if checking if the girl from elsewhere had earned the right to answer. Anna inhaled and did. Heat was making the promise of bread. The scent braided itself with lavender from the box and something tart, fermenting in a jar near the sink. I do, she said. Good, Zosha said. Then you can hear the rest. The day of the photograph, the two girls went to the river in each other's ribbons. Not because they needed to be clever, but because they liked making the day look up. They promised each other to keep their lines straight. Irina would angle her chin like Helena. Helena would hold her spine like Irina. Their mother had sighed as she tied the knots, but she did not forbid the joke. Children need to practice being something else so that when the world insists, they can tell the difference. Whose idea was the photographer? Anna asked. His own, Zosha said. He had a bicycle and a camera that was more suitcase than machine. He went door to door asking for faces. I told him he could have our faces if he promised to give them back. He promised like a man who had kept promises and like a man who had eaten the others. Did he keep this one? Anna touched the corner of the picture. Zosha's thumbprint had made a pale coin years ago in the emulsion. A woman's print. A mother's taxes paid in oil and concern. For this face, yes, Zosha said. For others, I do not know. Enough survived to say the day was real. That is what photographs are for when facts decide to do acrobatics. She poured more tea as if the photograph were thirsty. They ran errands then, my girls, she continued. Under the excuse of the ferry they carried apples and news. Peaches and questions. A parcel wrapped in brown paper that was probably a scarf and possibly an address. I let them because no mother can feed a house on fear. And because I had the box. She tapped the walnut lid. My mother's, not for jewels, for songs, for stitches between rooms. The swallow latch, you see? In our village the story said swallows remember all the roofs they have ever sewn a nest to. They carry maps in their throats. They can come back through storms with only a string of air to guide them. Once, my grandmother wound the box when soldiers had spent too long on the road. The box told them where to go to be someone else's problem. She said it matter-of-factly, not as a boast. I set rules because rules teach a door to behave. Did you read them? Anna nodded. She could feel them at the back of her tongue, a catechism in a new church. When the song begins, be seated. When the room tilts, do not stand. She had obeyed without knowing why. Gratitude rose in her like a blush. The box works best on kitchens, Zosha said. In rooms where women have to pretend to be small. It can find attics, too, but attics think too much of themselves. She winked. I keep it lined with blue so the swallows feel at home. Irina mopped up a splash of tea with the corner of a towel. Tell her the part about the ribbons at the ferry, she urged. The impatience of the younger self for her own story was nearly unbearable in its sweetness. Anna's throat hurt. Zosha obliged. Bowden squinted at the girls and said, Irina, you've grown taller today. And Helena said, only in the ways that matter, and her mouth quirked like it does in the picture. On the far bank the grocer's son. Tomas, Irina supplied, too quickly. Tomas tried, Halia, and Irina, until he got it right, and got jam on his fingers for his trouble. The men in coats did not look that day, because their ears had been fed somewhere else. The river gave everything its blessing and two fish jumped for good measure to pretend the day was just a day. And then? Anna asked, because story wants momentum. And then the box sang at home at an hour I did not ask it to sing, Zosha said simply, washing her hands. That is how you know when you have not been careful enough. She crossed to the cupboard, pulled out a tin, and opened it. Inside were buttons collected over years, a parliament of small round proofs that scarcity makes a person a keeper. She plucked one black one from its tin nest and spun it on the table until it wobbled to a stop. They had followed a laugh, not a ribbon, she said. The men, they like to pretend they are hunters who use their eyes. They use the thing that makes people bright, and this is dishonest of them. They had gone first to the print shop and not understood why calendars matter. Then they remembered the girl who speaks with her whole face. They asked a question at the ferry loud enough to be an answer. Bowden pretended his ears were old. Did they? Anna began, and stopped because her mouth had tried to drag her into witness before the scene wanted her. They came to the door, Zosha said. Men come to doors when they cannot find what they want outside. They hold paper as if paper were reason. They asked for Helena because the town had remembered her that day with her sister's ribbon but with her own mouth. That is when a ribbon stops being a joke and becomes a door handle someone else has a hand on. And you, Anna, did not know how to ask what a mother does between a swallow and the door. I put the box on the table and told it to draw a thread, Zosha said. I told my girls to sit. I told myself to learn how to make time fall asleep on command. It did not, but it blinked. She set the oven door ajar to let out a breath of heat. They had paper that said they could look in places and take what did not belong, she continued. I gave them tea because tea makes a face do something other than harm for a minute. They looked under the beds like people in stories who have not learned what real danger looks like. They knocked on the walls for hollow like men who have not learned what hollowness sounds like in a house that remembers. Did they see? Irina began, and closed her mouth in the middle like a person who had learned to be a secret. They saw a box with swallows, Zosha said, and laughed, because nothing that can fit in a girl's hands looks dangerous if your idea of danger has a hat. One of them tried to open it wrong and pinched his finger and swore. The lullaby laughed at him. He did not know he had been marked by a song. I did. Her eyes sparkled a just so amount. After that, nothing that man put in a drawer would stay. Paper has a sense of humor. Anna grinned despite herself, a small clean brightness cutting the anxiety. Good. It bought us a week, Zosha said. That is what magic is for. Not years. A week. Her voice softened. Helena used the week like a person who knows it is a borrowed book with no more renewals. She went to the print shop and did not go in. She met Lev by the cart with the cabbage and they did not look at each other except with their feet. They walked with space between them as if making room for the future to walk too. They spoke without moving their lips. Names lived in throats that day as if they were thieves. You saw? Anna asked, fascinated and appalled by the intimacy of a mother's knowing. Mothers see enough to ask better questions, Zosha said. I asked mine. The answer was what you expect from a girl with a bell for a laugh. She wanted to carry something bigger than herself and had chosen a boy to make the load more beautiful. Did you forbid her? Anna asked, not because she did not know the answer, but because wanting to know the way other women negotiate with time is one of the oldest hungers. I forbade the house to forget us, Zosha said. I told the box to teach the doors their hinges. I told Helena that if she wanted to stand in front of paper, she must remember she is a person, not a shield. I told Lev, when he came to ask if the kettle could boil while we were not home, that the kettle did as it was told and so did I. Anna tried to picture it. The boy with ink under his nails, the girl with her sister's ribbon, the mother with a box that could stitch minutes like a seamstress. The picture was a little too clean. The edges hurt. And then, she asked, because part of her wanted the pain to look the way it should so she could know where to place her hands. And then two things happened on the same afternoon, as they do when time wants to see if you can count, Zosha said. Lev's shop learned a new word for trouble, and the ferry forgot its rope. Bowden swore the knot had been faithful. The river laughed at him and took what it was owed. Who fell? Irina whispered, though she knew. People always ask the question whose answer they carry because the mouth wants to share the weight the heart has been lifting alone. No one, Zosha said quickly. No one in the water. The boat drifted sideways and everyone arrived wet and furious. That is their business. But while the town ran to the dock to fuss at Rope and River, the men in coats ran to the alley by the print shop because they preferred paper to people. Helena chose which crowd to follow. She chose paper. Of course she did, Irina said, fierce and proud. Of course, Zosha agreed. She went where words were going to be heard and stood between a page and a boot. Lev took the brunt of being idiotic. He turned his wrists over like someone polite so the men believed they were having a good day. Helena laughed, quiet, because bells were out of season, and my heart fell into the flour bin and did not get up until morning. Anna swallowed. The ribbon around her wrist constricted, as if remembering how to be a knot. Did they take him? She softened the pronoun, afraid of what her would do to the room. For a night, Zosha said. For a terrible, excellent, endless night. One night is enough to roll a lot of ink across a soul. He came back with a limp in how he looked at a door. We put soup into him until his hunger remembered he belonged to a body. Helena ironed his shirt like that could make the world repent. It did not. It did something else. What? Irina demanded, a girl again. It offered a very small, very fast door, Zosha said. A friend of a cousin of a notary who used to be a carpenter who had a brother by the border said that if two people with the right names in the right order and the wrong shoes on the right feet were to stand at a certain place on a Tuesday, they could wake up on Thursday somewhere the calendar had a different picture. It was a stupid door. You could not take much through it. Anything that rattled would be noticed. Anything that sang would be heard. Anything that had been said out loud would demand to be packed first. And they went, Anna said, not asking. They went, Zosha said. Because he would not survive 2 more nights and she would not survive one without turning herself into a blade. And because she had learned, listen to me, Anna, that you must sometimes leave to keep your name from being made useless. She came to the table at dawn when the box likes to stretch its spine and set down 2 things. The red ribbon and a folded paper that looked like guilt and read like a promise. Zosha reached into the box and, impossibly, the folded paper was there. The thread that had kept the letters together knew how to make room for a new old square with a crease that had learned to live in it. Zosha slid it across the table. The paper was thin with surviving. The handwriting was urgent and careful and slanted like a person walking uphill. Mama, it read, do not be angry. Keep Irina's blue ribbon on your wrist until we are where the calendar is polite. If anyone knocks for my mouth, give them your hands instead, because you have more. If the box allows, tell the future that I did not mean for my laughter to make a target of anyone but me. Lev says we must leave quiet. I say the river owes us 1 ferry. We will collect. P.S. If there is a child that arrives by accident, make her your business and call her by a name that has never been used to hurt anyone. Do not let anyone steal a word she could use later. The world will try. The room swayed, not because the box was being wounded, but because the postscript moved the center of gravity. Anna looked up sharply. Zosha met her eyes and did not look away. Yes, she said simply, answering all the questions the PS had smuggled into the kitchen. That happened later. That is the secret you tasted in your house's dust without knowing its name. But we will not run at it. We will let it walk to us with dignity. Irina's knuckles had gone white around her cup. You told me, Mama, she whispered, that some babies arrive like rain. No one ordered it, but the roof had better learn to sing. I told you that after, Zosha said. Because before there were still men in coats and a rope that resented the river and paper that liked to look like soup lists when it needed to. I told you that after because a person is not a lesson. She drew a breath that was part history, part bread aroma. The morning they left, The swallows sat dumb on the wire. Have you ever seen such a thing? As if stunned into prophecy. Helena tied the blue ribbon on my wrist with a knot I have never untied. She did not wear the red. She tucked it under the box for Irina because children must not be asked to go bareheaded into a future just because their elders have decided to be brave. Did they say goodbye? Anna asked, hating and needing the detail. They said the kind that counts, Zosha said, smoothing the crease in the note once with a thumb. They said each other's names out loud with witnesses. That is all goodbye is, when you cannot trust a train not to be a mouth. No one spoke for a minute. The oven ticked. The radio gave up on weather and played a waltz from a city that did not ask the right permission before being a city. Somewhere in the alley a cart bumped a stone with a sound that would always mean, stay, to anyone who had lived there long enough. Finally Zosha looked at Anna in that measuring way again, as if assessing the weight of what the girl could carry in her mouth without breaking her hands. You will not stay for the whole story, she said softly. The box is generous but not lazy. It will send you back when the room gets bored of impressing you. Before it does, there is one thing you must leave and one thing you must take. Anna's fingers tightened involuntarily on the cup. What do I leave? Something that is yours, Zosha said, that will not harm my kitchen by staying. It will teach the door the shape of your name so it can open for you on another day without kicking the frame. Anna thought of her phone and almost laughed. It would blow the kitchen's mind and be useless without towers. She thought of the hair tie at the end of her braid. Elastic in 1949 meant something else entirely. She thought of the pencil that had rolled from her hair. She pulled it from the pocket of her flannel. The future insists on pockets, and set it on the sill. A good choice, Zosha approved. It looks like something we would own if the world had been in a better mood. What do you take? She tapped the box. From here, not from hands. Anna understood without understanding why. She lifted the handkerchief. Forget-me-nots, Z in the corner, then hesitated. Not that, Zosha said gently. That is mine until I am done needing to forget and remember at the same time. Take the ribbon. The red one? Irina asked, startled. But, it is yours later, Zosha said, eyes on the future sitting at her table. It will find its way back to you on a day when the sky needs to be bossed around. For now, it will hold a place for a girl who came to ask a question and will go home with more than she planned. Anna's hands shook as she uncoiled the silk from the box's inner latch. It slid like something that had practiced. She tied it back around her wrist next to the ribbon that had come with the box like a twin choosing a bunk. How will I? She began, then stopped because the room tilted. Not in the theatrical way of a boat or a stage trick. In the way a story lets you see the next paragraph leaning. Zosha nodded once, satisfied. She reached across the table and took Anna's free hand between palms that had kneaded nations into bread all her life. Do not run toward voices that give you a name too heavy, she said. Not as warning but as blessing. When the song begins, sit. When the room tilts, let it. And when you come back, do not forget to eat. The future thinks too highly of fasting. Irina stood so abruptly her chair squealed. She rushed to the hook by the door, snatched something, and came back red-cheeked with urgency. She pressed a small, flat stone into Anna's palm. River-worn, warm from her pocket. For luck, she said roughly, trying to make her voice an older girl's and not managing. For when you forget where the ferry rope is tied. Anna closed her fingers around it. The weight was nothing and everything. She wanted to say I will tell you. That she would tell the girl with flour on her cheek how the photo would travel in boxes and the song would save their names. How she would be a grandmother who hummed to tame the edges of grief. She wanted to promise the right things. The letter had told her not to run toward voices. The rules had told her to carry stories in her mouth, choices in her hands. She chose. "Thank you," she said instead, with the seriousness of a vow. The music movement inside the walnut clicked, stretched, and woke. The lullaby rose like steam. The boards gathered themselves. The attached to this year things faded gently so as not to be rude. The oven exhaled one last fragrant sigh, as if to tuck bread into her pocket for the trip. Swallows stitched the doorway with a blur and then were thread, then were idea. "Ask for us again," Zosha said, as the room became a memory that had not yet happened. "But ask by the right door. And remember," Irina's voice came thinner now, a bright line through fog, "even when no one else does. We were two ribbons that day." The hatch was the hatch in her house again, stubborn, paint-chipped, squeaking in exactly the way she had spent a childhood learning to avoid. Dust had learned the habits of dust again. The river rock in Anna's hand was cool with attic shade. The pencil on the sill sat as if it had grown there from an idea. She sat very still until the room decided it had made its point. Then she set the box in her lap and laughed once, a short astonished sound that made the rafters look at each other like conspirators. Below, her mother's footsteps crossed tile. "Anna?" she called. "Are you still up there? You'll melt." "I'm coming," Anna said, and startled herself with the steadiness of her voice. She tucked the red ribbon against her wrist bone so it wouldn't slip. She slid the river stone into the little silk pocket where the photograph had lived and patted it like a pet. She closed the lid. The swallow latch yielded and then held like a woman who understands agreement is different from surrender. At the hatch, she paused and looked back. The pencil glowed faintly in the heat, the yellow lacquer a bright syllable in the language of wood. A promise by another name. She nodded to it, to the swallows, to the place where the smell of bread had refused to fully leave. Then she climbed down into the kitchen where August was August again, and gathered her mother into a hug that made no sense to either of them and required no explanation. "What's this?" her mother mumbled into her shoulder, surprised. "You smell like lavender and every oven I ever loved." Anna swallowed the story because it belonged in her mouth for now. She opened her hand and showed her mother the box because that choice belonged in the kitchen. "Do you remember," she asked carefully, "ever hearing the name Helena?" Her mother went very still, like a deer on a road when it hears a car turning into the sentence. For a long second the room held. The fan murmured. A fly scribbled the corner of the window. Then her mother looked down at the swallow latch and did something Anna had not seen her do in 2 weeks. She let her face show that it could change. "I remember being told not to," she said softly. "And I remember a photograph that went missing in 1993 and the way your grandmother's hands shook when she said it didn't matter." She lifted her eyes. The blue ring around the green was a signature inherited and undeniable. "Why are you asking?" "Because the house remembered the way," Anna thought. "Because 2 ribbons became a rope across a river, and I am on it. Because it's time for our family to be a larger shape," she said aloud. "Because there's a story that tried to walk without us." Her mother blinked tears she would not name. "Then let's set the table," she said briskly, practical as prayer. "Stories eat better when they have plates." Anna set out 2. Then, without comment, she added a third. "Hello again, my dear listener. Crescent moon. Before we begin, let me remind you, if you've been enjoying this journey through memory and mystery, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps these stories alive and helps me keep telling them for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. I wish you a wonderful listening experience. Now, let's step back into the story. Anna had thought the attic adventure would be enough for a lifetime. That she could keep the box on her shelf like a secret pet, stroke the ribbon when the world felt heavy, and know that somewhere in the folds of lavender and dust her great-grandmother and the sisters still lived, laughing and carrying words across the dangerous streets of their own time. But stories do not allow themselves to be packed away so easily. 1 week later, the photograph began to change. It happened in the late afternoon, when golden light spilled across the wooden floorboards of her room. Anna had propped the photograph against a stack of books, unable to bear hiding it in a drawer. She was doing homework half-heartedly when her eyes wandered to the image. And froze. There were 3 figures now. Helena, with her tilted smile. Irina, smaller but fierce. And behind them, faint and blurred, a third shape, tall, with a hat shadowing its face. Anna's skin prickled. She leaned closer, convinced it was a trick of the light. But the more she looked, the clearer it became. A man, standing just at the edge of the frame, as if he had always been there, waiting for the photograph to remember him. Her hand trembled toward the box. She unlatched the swallow clasp. The lullaby started on its own, as though the box had been anticipating her touch. The room tilted, gently, not with the sudden pull of last time, but like a boat rocking into a current it could not refuse. The kitchen unfolded around her again. But it was darker now. The lamps were lit though it was only afternoon, and the air smelled of rain pressing against the windows. Zosha stood by the table, her shoulders tight, her hands kneading dough with a violence that was almost punishment. Irina sat on the bench, not washing dishes this time but clutching her knees, chin resting on them, wide eyes staring at nothing. "Ah," Zosha said without looking up. "The future girl comes back. That means the box wants another witness." She slapped the dough hard. "Good. The box is wiser than I am." "What happened?" Anna whispered. Zosha did not answer at once. Instead, she wiped her hands on her apron and finally looked at Anna. Her face was tired in a way Anna had not seen before, not the weariness of baking or surviving, but the kind of exhaustion that comes from waiting for something bad to knock on your door and knowing it will. "They came again," Zosha said. "The men with paper and questions. This time they did not laugh at the swallow latch." Anna's stomach dropped. "Did they take Helena?" "No." Zosha's voice was sharp, but it softened. "Not yet. She was clever. She left before they arrived. But cleverness has shadows, and sometimes shadows step into photographs." Anna's breath caught. "The man?" "Yes." Zosha's eyes narrowed. "You saw him, didn't you? In the picture." Anna nodded. Zosha sat across from her, folding her hands as if to stop them from trembling. "He is not a ghost. He is worse. He is memory that refuses to stay in 1 year. That man, he followed my girl. Not in flesh but in the weight of his attention. He is the kind of man who collects names the way others collect stamps. Once he has your name, he tries to own your future." Anna shivered. She could almost feel the man's shadow pressing against her own back, even though she was safe in this memory kitchen. Irina finally spoke, her voice small. "He watched us at the river. He never blinked. Even when Bowden splashed water in his shoes, he never looked away. He smiled, but not like a person. Like a wolf who knows the door is weak." Zosha reached across and stroked her daughter's hair. "Do not give him teeth in your story, Ribka. He only has as much power as we allow. That is why you must tell it carefully." Anna realized suddenly that she, too, was part of this story now. The ribbon on her wrist tightened again, reminding her, The past was not just for watching. It was asking her to hold a piece of its weight. But what happened to Helena? Anna pressed, her heart hammering. Did she leave with Lev? Did she escape? Zosha looked at her long and hard. Some questions you must not rush. If you sprint through a story, it will trip you. Helena left something behind that even the coats could not steal. That is why the box brought you again. She reached under the table and pulled out a small parcel wrapped in brown paper. Inside was another ribbon, but this one was not blue or red. It was white, embroidered with delicate gold thread. This, Zosha said softly, was meant for a wedding. Anna gasped. Her wedding? Zosha nodded. To Lev. It was hidden here, under the breadboards, waiting for a day that never came. Or perhaps a day that still waits. I do not know. But now the box has decided it belongs to you, until the story finishes its walk. She pressed the ribbon into Anna's hands. It was soft, almost glowing in the lamplight. Irina whispered, "Keep it safe. If he sees it, he will follow you too." Anna swallowed hard. The man's blurred shadow in the photograph returned to her mind. What if he already had? Outside, thunder cracked, and the window panes rattled. The swallow latch of the box clicked shut by itself, as if warning her, enough for now. The kitchen began to fade, its warmth retreating into silence. Zosha's voice followed her as the room tilted back toward her own time. Remember, child, some shadows are only strong when no one dares to name them. Speak her name, and you will keep her alive. Forget her, and you feed him. The last thing Anna saw was Irina clutching her knees tighter, whispering her sister's name like a prayer. Helena. And then Anna was back in her bedroom, the storm of 1949 gone, replaced by the hum of traffic outside her modern window. But the photograph still sat on her desk, and the man's shadow was clearer now. Almost as if he had taken one step closer. Hello again, dear listener. Crescent moon sparkles. We've arrived at the final chapter of Anna's mysterious journey. Before I begin, let me remind you, if this story has touched your heart, please subscribe, leave a like, and share it with a friend who loves stories filled with memory, history, and secrets. Thank you for being here with me. Your time means everything. Now, let's step into the ending. The photograph that breathed. For nights afterward, Anna hardly slept. The photograph stayed on her desk, its shadowed man watching from the edge. The new ribbon, white and gold, lay beside her pillow, as if protecting her dreams. Every morning, she expected the shadow to grow stronger. And it did. By the third day, she could almost see his face, blurred, but with the unmistakable heaviness of eyes that collected secrets. She wanted to throw the photo away, bury it under stone. But she remembered Zosha's warning. Speak her name, and you will keep her alive. So she whispered Helena's name at night. Sometimes the photograph seemed to soften, as if the shadow retreated for a moment. But Anna knew it wouldn't be enough. The box had not finished its work. The last descent. On the fourth night, the lullaby began without her touching the latch. Soft, haunting notes filled her room. The box was calling. Anna pressed the white ribbon against her heart and let herself fall into its pull. This time, she did not land in the kitchen. She stood in a square. Cobblestones glistened from rain. Lanterns burned weakly, and in the center of the square was a small crowd, too quiet for celebration, too restless for peace. She saw Helena. Her hair was braided with flowers, though they were damp and wilted. Her face was pale but unbroken. Beside her, Lev stood with a jaw clenched hard enough to break teeth. And just behind them, in the shadows, stood him. The man from the photograph. His coat dark as oil, his eyes glittering like knives catching firelight. Anna's breath hitched. Could he see her? Helena's gaze flicked suddenly toward Anna, as if she could. For a heartbeat, their eyes locked across years and memory. Then Helena gave the smallest nod, almost imperceptible. Anna clutched the ribbon tighter. A secret unfolded. The voices in the square grew louder. A paper was read aloud, charges of treachery, of betrayal. Helena and Lev accused of carrying forbidden words, of speaking hope when silence was demanded. Anna shook her head desperately. This wasn't how it was supposed to be. Zosha had given her the wedding ribbon, but this was no wedding. And then, a miracle. Irina darted from the crowd, small but fierce, clutching another parcel. She hurled it toward Helena, who caught it with bound hands. It was the white ribbon, its twin. Helena pressed it to her chest, then looked at Anna once more. The box at Anna's side flared with light. For the first time, Anna heard Helena's voice, clear and strong, cutting through the square. Do not let them erase us. The shadow breaks. The man in the hat turned. His eyes landed on Anna. And for the first time, his shadow stepped fully forward, no longer blurred. He reached, not for Helena, but for Anna, across decades, across the veil of memory. Anna felt a cold grip on her wrist. She almost screamed, but then she remembered Zosha's words. Speak her name, Helena, Anna shouted. Her voice echoed through the square, through her bedroom, through every hidden corner of memory. Helena. The white ribbon blazed with golden light. The shadow recoiled, hissing, shrinking back into the photograph. The man's outline blurred again, weaker, fainter, until he was nothing but a smudge of smoke. Helena's face softened. She smiled, a smile full of defiance and gratitude. Then, like a candle extinguished, the scene dissolved. The return. Anna collapsed back into her room, the box on her lap, the photograph on the desk. The photograph was different now. Helena and Lev stood proudly in the center. Irina at their side, her hand in her sister's. And the man? Gone. His shadow erased. Anna touched the photograph, tears spilling down her cheeks. The box clicked shut on its own. It no longer hummed, no longer glowed. Its work was finished, but the ribbons remained, blue, red, white with gold. Tokens of a story that had lived, fought, and survived. What she learned. Anna carried the photograph downstairs the next morning. Her mother looked up from her tea. Where did you find that? She asked softly, almost reverently. In the attic, Anna whispered. It was waiting. Her mother touched the image, her own eyes filling. Your great-aunt Helena. We never knew what truly happened to her. Only rumors. But here, she stopped, too overwhelmed to continue. Anna held her hand. She did not tell her about the shadow, or the square, or the voice that had crossed years. Some truths were too fragile for casual retelling. But in her heart, she carried the vow. They would not be erased. Closing the story. Years later, when Anna was grown, she still kept the ribbons in a small glass case by her bed. And sometimes when she closed her eyes, she heard the faint lullaby, not haunting now, but comforting. A reminder that memory is not weakness. Memory is armor. And when she whispered Helena's name, she knew the past whispered back. Thank you.